السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. الحمد لله رب العالمين والعاقبة للمتقين والصلاة والسلام على سيد الأنبياء والمرسلين وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. أما بعد. Jazakumullah khair everyone for joining this webinar on Zakat, and Jazakumullah khair to Siblings of Ilm for inviting me to present this webinar. Inshallah, this Zakat presentation, the way that it's been prepared is to be able to deal with most of the common scenarios that will occur regarding giving and taking of Zakat. So most people, inshallah, after this webinar will be able to understand how Zakat is to be worked out, how Zakat is to be given and distributed. Of course, there are going to be certain areas which are more technical than others, and certain circumstances, individuals may have certain circumstances which are extremely technical, and they may need private consultation with an alim or an imam, etc. But inshallah, this webinar should cover most of the basic rules and regulations regarding Zakat that inshallah most people will be able to work out their Zakat. Before we start, inshallah, just a few introductory points. This has been set up primarily to deal with the Hanafi school of Fiqh. So with the other madhahib, there are slight differences and variations, but inshallah we will be focusing from the Hanafi school of law, inshallah. Also, there's a lot of resources, as Maulana mentioned, regarding Zakat out there. And to put this presentation together, I have consulted other resources as well. So, for example, there's Mufti Faraz Adam, Mufti Zubair Bat, Mufti Abdul Rahman Mangera, Maulana Ibrahim Noor in Coventry. So I've consulted different sources and resources that are already available and use them within this presentation. So if there are certain things that you may see, and I will, inshallah, if something comes up to take it from another source, I will mention here that this has come from a particular source to give relevant credit where it is due, inshallah ta'ala. Okay. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم وما آتيتم من زكاة تريدون وجه الله فأولئك هم المضعفون. Now, before we go into the actual fiqh of zakat, before we go into the calculation of how to work out zakat and how to work out who you have to give zakat to, we need to first have the right mindset regarding giving zakat and regarding taking zakat. So there are certain verses in the Qur'an and there are hadith by the Prophet ﷺ which help us build that mindset. How should we look at zakat? What should our perspective be on it? So with this verse plays a very important role. Whatever zakat you give seeking Allah's pleasure with it, it is multiplied by Allah, and it is such people who multiply their wealth in real terms. Now, a person who is taking zakat out of the wealth. So for example, you've got a bank balance and you've got a certain amount of wealth in your bank, and you're going to extract a certain percentage to give to the poor. Now, what happens when you're looking at the bank balance before and after you've paid zakat? Before and after you've paid zakat is the bank balance is going to go down. That's what we see from our perspective. The bank balance has gone down. And this might even put some people off, that I don't want the bank balance to go down. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is sending a message here in this verse that your bank balance, it may visually seem like it's decreasing and it's going down, but the reality is it's actually being invested and multiplied in the akhirah. So just like a person, if they want to embark on an investment journey, you take out some wealth from your bank and you go put it into an investment. And that you wouldn't consider to be a deduction because you're actually investing it. So the idea is now that's going to grow and grow and grow, and it's going to become more and more profitable. Similarly, when a person takes out zakat from their wealth, they're ultimately handing that over to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, who in the akhirah is going to be investing it on behalf of that person. And the rewards and the benefit and the fruit of all of that will be seen in the next life. So فَأُولَٰئِكَ هُمُ الْمُضْعِفُونَ. These are the people who multiply their wealth in real terms. Okay, so what is zakat? What is zakat? Zakat literally means to purify. It is one of the 5 pillars of Islam, and it has also been interpreted as a means to purify one's wealth by distributing a prescribed amount to the poor as a fundamental ibadah. So when it comes to zakat, there are 2 things that we want to focus on. One is the aspect that it is a form of ibadah. Okay, it's a means of gaining closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It's a means of building that relationship and that bond that you have with your Creator. So just like we see Salah as an ibadah that we do 5 times a day, and we put our forehead on the ground to get closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and fulfill our religious duty. Similarly, zakat is not just any sort of charity or any sort of donation. It's also a means of connecting yourself to your Creator, to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And the second aspect of zakat, which is very interesting, is the aspect of purity and purification. The section with the purification section. Now, imagine a person has wealth. You can have halal wealth and you can have haram wealth, right? Now, haram wealth is obviously impure. A person shouldn't have any haram wealth. But even the pure wealth which a person has, even that wealth has a form of purification that it should go through and that it needs to go through. And how is that wealth purified? That is through the means of giving zakat. So when a person takes zakat out of the wealth, and it purifies the wealth, that increases it in barakah and increases it in blessing. And if you compare two people, you have a person with small income, small amount of wealth, but maximum benefit and barakah in their wealth. That small amount of wealth will go a long way. They'll feel content. They'll feel at peace in their heart. Whereas a person may have a large amount of wealth where they're not distributing their zakat. So that large amount of wealth has a small amount of blessing and barakah, if any, right? Now that person, despite the large amount of wealth, they don't see the barakah, they don't see the blessing, they don't feel content with what they have. So that's why when it comes to our zakat, we need to think of the ibadah aspect as well as the purification aspect. Now, from a religious perspective, in Sharia, zakat it refers to the annual duty of a Muslim who possesses the zakat threshold called the Niṣāb to pay 2.5% of certain types of wealth. Now, we're going to break this apart, inshallah, as we go along. What is the Niṣāb? How do you work out 2.5%? Who has to pay zakat? But the idea is, generally, there are certain types of assets that you're going to have, and you're going to have to pay 2.5% zakat on those assets, inshallah. Okay, again, going back to the importance of zakat and going back to how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has addressed zakat and the kind of rank that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given to zakat. So, zakat in the Qur'an, 32. And on top of that, there are 15 references to sadaqah. 15 references to sadaqah. And sadaqah is a more general term, which includes zakat and non-zakat. Okay? So, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has mentioned zakat 32 times in the Quran. That in itself tells us about the importance and the value that this obligation has in the eyes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And not only that, but Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala brings it coupled with salat a lot of the time. Now, salah we do day in, day out, 5 times a day. So we see the value and the importance of it. Unfortunately, zakat is something that you only distribute once in the year. So you don't always have that at the top of your mind that this is a very fundamental act of worship. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala brings them together. أَقِيمُوا الصَّلَاةَ وَآتُوا الزَّكَاةَ وَارْكَعُوا مَعَ الرَّاكِعِينَ. Perform salah and give your zakat and bow down along with the raki'in, those who are prostrating. So numerous times in the Quran, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala brings zakat and salah together, again showing the rank. And if you look at the next verse, وَالْمُؤْمِنُونَ وَالْمُؤْمِنَاتُ بَعْضُهُمْ أَوْلِيَاءُ بَعْضٍ يأمرون بالمعروف وينهون عن المنكر ويقيمون الصلاة ويؤتون الزكاة ويطيعون الله ورسوله أولئك سيرحمهم الله إن الله عزيز حكيم. The believing men and the believing women. Now Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling us the qualities and the attributes of a mu'min. A mu'min is a person who has iman, a person who Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has confirmed that this person is a believer. So you have believers, you have disbelievers, you have munafiqun, you have hypocrites in between. Who is a believer? Who is a person who has true iman in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? What are the qualities and characteristics of that person? So from amongst those characteristics, one of them, yuqimuna as-salah again. And with that, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala brings وَيُؤْتُونَ الزَّكَاةَ, a person who pays the zakat and a person who fulfills this religious duty and obligation of paying zakat. So if we want to be categorized and classed amongst the mu'mineen, then what do we need to do? We need to make sure that we fulfill these qualities and we fulfill these characteristics. So we need to make sure that we pray our salah. We need to make sure that we fulfill our zakah. And ya'muruna bil ma'ruf, of course, and yanhawna 'anil munkar. But that can be a whole presentation in itself. Moving on, still with the virtues of giving zakat. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala draws a comparison here to help us understand what zakat does for a person. So the parable of those who spend their wealth in the way of Allah is that of a grain of corn. It grows 7 ears and each ear has 100 grains. Allah increases manifold to whom He pleases. Take this example. A person who wants to grow corn. Now we know when we have corn on the cob, for example, it's not just one grain of corn, right? There's numerous, if not dozens or hundreds of pieces of corn. Now, in order to grow that corn, what did you have to plant? You only had to plant 1 or 2 or 3 seeds. You place them in the ground and you grow them. That then starts developing and flourishing and becomes a plant. That plant then has multiple ears, and in each of those ears you have hundreds of grains of corn. Okay? Now that is a similarity which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is drawing with zakat. That you're only taking out 2.5% of your wealth, all the wealth which Allah has given you. You only have to take out 2.5% of that. Now, when you invest that, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala grows, just like this one seed is growing into numerous grains of corn, your investment in the akhirah is going to grow and grow and grow. And the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam was ordered to take sadaqah, obligatory alms, so zakat, out of their wealth through which you may cleanse and purify them. So the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam was also given the order to take zakat out of the people's wealth. And again, here Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is clarifying that it's a means of purification. It's a means of blessing and barakah, and for you to purify all of your assets that you have. Now, this is very important when it comes to building our mindset of zakat and what it is. Okay? And I give this example a lot because it helps me to relate anyway. When a person does something that they shouldn't be doing in their car, for example. So a person takes a left turn where they shouldn't be taking a left turn, or they do a U-turn where they shouldn't be, or they park somewhere where they shouldn't park. Now in the post, you're going to get a letter and it's going to give you a fine, right? One of the options on the fine is going to be representation or challenge the penalty notice. Now, most likely, a lot of people, what they do is because it's just, it doesn't cost much to challenge the notice, right? And if you get lucky, you get lucky. You don't have to pay it. Unfortunately, if you don't get lucky, then you have to pay the fine. It's not going to make much of a difference. So it's always worth challenging it, right? Try and give some sort of reason and excuse to wiggle your way out. Now, that works with fines and penalties. But our mindset when it comes to zakat shouldn't be we want to work our way out of it. Our mindset should be that we want to pay as much as we can of it. Because it's a means of gaining closer to Allah, and it's a means of gaining barakah and blessing and purifying our wealth. Now, a person who tries to weave themselves out of having to pay zakat, the problem with that is you're ultimately weaving yourself out of an ibadah, and you're avoiding getting closer to Allah, and you're avoiding this investment in the akhirah, which obviously a person wouldn't want to be doing. So zakat is an act of worship and not a punishment, and it's not a fine. So a person should look forward to paying zakat, and it's going to be a means of purification, blessing, and great reward for that person. Now, 2 principles that we're going to work with when we're going through this, the fiqh of zakat. Sometimes there are going to be differences of opinion, even within the Hanafi school of law. So what we're going to try and do, I'm going to explain the various different opinions so that everybody is aware of the opinions. And then I'm going to give preference from a personal perspective, give preference cautious. The reason why we want to is more cautious is because we want to make sure that we fulfill our religious duty and responsibility in this world before we pass on into the next life. Nobody wants to wake up on the day of judgment with debt that they haven't paid to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Whether it's salah, whether it's zakah, whether it's fasting, all the responsibilities and duties that we have and all of this debt that we have in this world, we want to make sure it's all fulfilled before we come into the next life. So we're going to adopt a more cautious approach so that we can ensure that all the responsibilities and duties are fulfilled and we have no accountability left. Another principle that is used within the text of the jurist is anfa' lil fuqara. So if there are different ways of looking at a certain method of giving zakat, one benefits the poor people more and another benefits them less. We're going to look at that which benefits the poor people more, because zakat is essentially about us thinking about the poor people. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has blessed us with so much wealth. When we came into this world, what did we have? We had absolutely nothing. To be honest, we didn't even have the clothing that we wear at the moment. We came in totally naked, right? We didn't even have clothing. We didn't have teeth in our mouth, right? We didn't even have a beard. We had nothing. Then as we grew older and as we started collecting and gaining wealth, all of this wealth is a blessing from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And of that, all of that which Allah has given us, He gave us 100%. He's only asking us to give back 2.5%, no more. Just 2.5% as a religious obligation, which is nothing in comparison to what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given us. So it's time for us to now start thinking, not about ourselves, start thinking about the poor people and start thinking about the fuqara and those poor people and trying to benefit them the most, inshallah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Okay, so we have blessings and we have virtues for paying zakat, but at the same time, there are also certain warnings for not paying zakat. So in this hadith, the Prophet ﷺ said, whoever is made wealthy by Allah, again, wealthy by Allah, made wealthy by Allah. Allah is the one that makes a person wealthy. We may open a business which is profitable and successful, but what is behind the success of that business? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Because there are so many people that try and start businesses and they totally fail. They don't succeed. So behind everything is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So whoever is made wealthy by Allah and does not pay zakat on their wealth on the day of resurrection, their wealth will be made like a bald-headed, poisonous male snake with 2 black spots over the eyes. The snake will encircle his neck and bite his cheeks and say, I am your wealth, I am your treasure. Then the Prophet ﷺ recited the verse, let not those who withhold of that which Allah has blessed them, to the end of that verse. Now, in this hadith, we can see that there are certain religious duties and obligations in this world that they may seem like they disappear. For example, if a person prays salah, when you pray salah, there's no tangible salah that's flying around. Or when you do dhikr and you say la ilaha illallah, that kalima is not flying around that you can see anymore, it disappears. But the reality is it's not disappearing. It's going to follow you around until you pass away and it's going to follow you into the grave. Similarly, if you don't fulfill certain religious duties and obligations, the wealth which you thought was just wealth will change form in the akhirah and may come in the form of a snake, for example, and punish a person because they didn't fulfill their religious duty and obligation in this world. It's very important for us to realize that we want to fulfill all debts and duties and responsibilities in this world before we pass on into the next life. Then in the hadith, the Prophet ﷺ, he once turned to the companions and he said, "O Muhajirun, there are 5 things with which you will be tested. And I seek refuge with Allah, lest you should live to see those 5 things. And from amongst them, one of those was that the people do not withhold the zakat of the wealth, except that rain will be withheld from the sky. And were it not for the animals, no rain would befall them." Now we know through the teachings of the Qur'an that our actions do have consequences. Not just in this world, but our actions also have consequences in the akhirah and in the next life also. For example, if we read about previous nations, sometimes previous nations will not follow the commandments of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and they will not believe in the Prophet that was sent to them. As a result of which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sends wind, rain, stones, and all sorts of punishment in this world. So the world is changing as a result of people's actions. So similarly, if a community decide that we're not going to pay zakat anymore, people just stop paying zakat, then that can have consequences in the world around us. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala could even withhold the rain from us and as a means of punishment. Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam had also said, when you pay your zakat, you have fulfilled what is required of you. So once you've paid your zakat, you have then fulfilled your responsibility and you have fulfilled your duty in this world. Okay, so that's just a brief introduction regarding zakat, and that's a brief introduction regarding the importance of paying zakat, the benefits, the virtues, and some warnings for a person who does not pay zakat. Now we're going to start going into the actual fiqh of zakat. Now, once we start the fiqh, what I'm going to do is every now and again, there's going to be, at the end of a small section, there's going to be a part where I pause for questions. So then we can, inshallah, deal with questions as we go along. Instead of leaving them all to the end, after each section, that we're going to discuss that section. If anyone has any questions that they want to discuss that they didn't understand, then we can discuss that as we go along, inshallah ta'ala. So starting with whom is zakat obligatory upon? There are 4 important conditions in order for zakat to be obligatory upon a person. Number 1, the person needs to be sane, they need to be an adult, they need to be a Muslim, and number four, they need to have a certain threshold of wealth. They need to meet a certain threshold, certain amount of wealth they need to have, called the Niṣāb. Now, what it means to be sane. Now, certain people have certain illnesses, especially as you grow older. A person may develop certain illnesses, dementia, whatever it may be. Now, again, there's a broad spectrum, so we won't be able to just say this illness absolves the person from having to pay zakat, or they no longer have to pay zakat. It's going to be on that person's mental ability. So sometimes people reach a certain age, or their state is such that they can't remember at all. To be honest, they might even pray salah, and straight after they've prayed salah, they don't even remember that they've prayed salah, and they're dependent on other people to tell them what they need to pray, whether they need to do wudu, whether they need to pay their zakat, etc. So a person who can generally think for themselves is considered a person who is sane and will be responsible for paying zakat. If a person does not have mental capacity to be able to make decisions for themselves, and they're totally dependent on other people, then they're going to fall out the remit of taklif, and they're not going to be mukallaf and accountable. Number two, you have a person who is an adult. Now, by adult, we're referring to a person who is mature Islamically. So they're baligh. They've reached the age of bulugh. We're not referring to someone who's reached 18 years of age or 16 years of age, depending on whichever country a person is from. So if a person is baligh and mature, then they have to pay zakat on their wealth. And if a person is not mature and they have wealth, then there is no zakat on that wealth. Now, just to clarify here, sometimes parents, what they do is they separate money for their children. Now, it's very important to determine who that wealth belongs to. It's very important in Islam to always determine who wealth belongs to. Okay, there's two options. Either you've separated that money on the side for your own management of your own finances, right? So I've separated a certain amount of money so that when my children grow old, I'm going to pay their tuition fees or school fees or whatever it is with that money, or I'm going to spend on them with this money. So ultimately, you're keeping the money in your ownership. So the money and the wealth is yours. And then you're going to spend on your child from there. So if it's yours, then you have to pay zakat on it. But if a person has separated the money and they're collecting it for their child, and it's actually the intention is to pass it on to the ownership of their children, and they're no longer the owners of that wealth, it belongs to their children. Now that wealth is not zakatable if the child is not mature. However, when they become mature, that wealth will become zakatable. So it's important to determine when you're saving or putting money aside, who does the money belong to? Number three, a Muslim. So if a person reverts to Islam, they're only going to start paying zakat from the years going forward. Number four, zakat threshold, Niṣāb. You have to have a certain amount of wealth before you have to pay zakat. If you don't reach that certain amount of wealth, then you don't have to pay zakat. And we're going to have a whole discussion on what it means to meet a certain threshold and what it means to meet the Niṣāb. Okay, so here we are. This is the section actually on the Niṣāb. So how much wealth do you have to have before you have to pay zakat? If a person has 50 pounds, do they have to pay zakat? If a person has 200 pounds, do they have to pay zakat? What about if they have 700 pounds? So how much wealth do you have to have before you pay zakat? Now, remember, there are four zakatable assets which we're going to go into: cash, gold, silver, and merchandise stock, business stock. So four things you have to pay zakat on: cash, gold, silver, and business stock. When the value of those four things reach the threshold, then you have to pay zakat. And if it doesn't reach the threshold, you don't have to pay zakat. Now, there's two thresholds that you're going to work with, and this can get slightly complicated, so make sure you're focusing. There's two thresholds, one is higher, one is lower, and depending on the wealth that you have is going to determine which threshold you're going to go by. So let me explain it first, and then if anyone has any questions, we can pause at the end of the slide to deal with any questions. The first threshold is gold. Okay. Now the limit is 87.48 grams of gold. So that's the first threshold, 87.48 grams of gold. Now, if you look at the bottom right, I've done a small calculation of how to work out the threshold based on Niṣāb, zakat, gold. So the gold Niṣāb, the threshold is 87.48 grams. The price, this was on the 16th, today is the 18th, so it's 2 days old. So today there might be a slight variation. Price per gram of gold was £46.32. So you multiply the two, because you need 87 grams of gold. And that came up to, on, I think this was on Saturday. Yeah, Saturday, £4,050. So the first threshold, if you're going to work it out through the gold Niṣāb, is £4,050. Now that means if a person has assets up to that much, then they're going to have to pay zakat. And if they don't pay zakat. That's if you're using the gold Niṣāb. On the other side, we've got the silver Niṣāb. Now the silver Niṣāb is much lower. It's 612 grams of silver, 612 grams of silver, 0.36 grams of silver. But the price of silver is very less, right? So on Saturday, the price per gram was 44 pence. So if you multiply the two, the silver Niṣāb is £269.43. So just say £270. If you have more than that, you pay zakat. If you have less than that, you don't pay zakat. And the question is, you've got a threshold at 4,000, you've got a threshold at £270. What do you do if you're like in between, £500, or you've got £1,000? That means according to the silver Niṣāb, you don't have to pay zakat. You do, but according to the gold, you don't have to pay zakat. So how does that work? So that's what the bottom left corner is for, which Niṣāb to use. Now, you've got 4 zakatable assets: cash, gold, silver, and merchandise. Stop. If a person only owns gold, someone's only got gold jewelry, for example, they have nothing else. They have no cash, not even a pound, no silver, no stock, no merchandise. Then they go by the gold Niṣāb. So a person has only gold, they're going to go by the gold Niṣāb. So that means if your gold is worth £4,050 or more, then you have to pay 2.5% of that. If it's less than that, then you don't have to pay zakat. However, if you have other than gold, so if you have cash, or you have silver, or you have trade stock, or you have a mixer, you have gold and one of these, then you're going to go by the silver Niṣāb. So that means, and this is going to apply to most people, so if you have cash, silver, or merchandise, or stock, or anything else, along with gold, or even if you don't have gold, you have any of these three, you're going to go by the silver Niṣāb, which means if those zakatable assets come up to the value of 269, we'll try and find a more update one for today. Maybe it'll change by a couple of pounds or pence. £270 roughly, let's just keep that as a figure for now. Then you have to pay zakat, otherwise you don't have to pay zakat. Now, before we go on to the next section, let's just pause here. If anyone has any questions on what we've discussed so far, just type that into the Q&A. I think it'd be easier if we just use it for questions. Just stick to the Q&A. If there's any discussions that I'm going to start off, we'll use the chat for the discussions. It's just so that it's all in one area, one location, easier to navigate. Okay, so someone sent a few questions in. They're saying zakat on shares, investment. So we're going to cover all of that. Zakat on land, we're going to cover that. Shares, that's all going to come, inshallah ta'ala. Don't worry about that. Okay, so somebody's asked a good question, that the imbalance between gold and silver is very, very big, which may not have been the case at the time of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And that's a valid point. Now, what happens is, because from the Hanafi fiqh perspective, again, that principle, anfa' lil fuqara. So Imam Abu Hanifa, he goes by this principle a lot. Anfa' lil fuqara. If a person has assets of £500, for example, if you go by the silver Niṣāb, you're going to pay zakat. Remember, it's only proportional. So if you have £500, you're only paying 2.5% of that. Okay, so it's a very small amount, even though you may have a small amount, but it's a very, very small amount. But the benefit of going by the silver Niṣāb is that it's more beneficial for the poor people, because more people will be paying zakat and more people. Now, I know that there are some ulama that are writing papers and are doing research on this matter as to whether the public should now move over, because silver has dropped down so much, move over to the gold and Niṣāb, because that is more a more of an accurate reflection, if you want to say, of poverty and wealth. However, that is still research that ulama are doing. They're still being discussed. And there are many fiqh seminars that have taken place. Many of those fiqh seminars have still concluded on using silver based on this principle of anfa' al-fuqara. So that's what we go with, and that's what I personally go with at the moment as well. That stick to the silver Niṣāb. Again, if a person only has £400, they're only going to give a small percentage of that anyway. The zakat for gold, again, that's going to come, inshallah. How much savings do you need to have to pay zakat? Yeah. So again, this is the threshold is £270. If a person has that, but inshallah, let us continue and then we'll deal with that as we go along. You'll be able to decide what you can deduct, what you can add, etc. Regarding someone asking to repeat, the parents saving money for their children. So if you're saving the money, but it's your own, you're keeping it for yourself, but you're just managing it to look after your child. So I'm saving this money and I'm going to spend it on my child when they get to a certain age. I'm going to pay their school fees, etc. That wealth is yours. You have to pay zakat on it. But if you've put it into a pot that it belongs to your child now, and the child is not mature, then there is no zakat on that until the child becomes mature. Okay, there's a lot of questions that are coming in. What I'm going to do is I'm going to move on because a lot of these questions are going to be answered, inshallah, as we go along. So let me move on and then we'll take questions again, then inshallah. Okay, so what we need to do now is we need to determine a zakat date. Okay, we need to determine a zakat date. When do I need to pay my zakat? What is the date that I have to pay my zakat? Now, for a person that's already got a zakat date, they're going to stick with that zakat date going forward. And if a person doesn't have a zakat date, what they're going to do is you're going to have to determine one first. Now, how do you determine one? The Niṣāb is £270, okay, at the moment. You need to find out when is the first time that you went above £270. When is the first time you went above £270? So for example, here, the 1st of Ramadan, a person received loads of gifts and gifts, etc., and they managed to go over £270 for the first time in their life. Now they're going to look at the end of the next year at the 1st of Ramadan. In the 1st of Ramadan, they went above Niṣāb, and now the next year at the 1st of Ramadan, they're going to have to see, are they above Niṣāb? If so, then that is now their zakat date. So the 1st of Ramadan is now their zakat date. And if they're below the Niṣāb, then they haven't stipulated, they haven't fixed a date. So you need to have a full year above Niṣāb at the beginning and above Niṣāb at the end. If that is the case, then you're able to determine a zakat date. It doesn't matter if it goes up and down throughout the year. Okay? So let's take our example as 10th Muharram, a person went above Niṣāb, and we're going to go by the Islamic year. We have to go by the Islamic year. 10th of Muharram, you go above the Niṣāb. And then during a few months, for example, during Sha'ban or Ramadan, you went down because you made some donations. And then Dhul Qa'dah, Dhul Hijjah went up again. But by the 10th of Muharram, the next year, you're above the Niṣāb again. That is your zakat date, and now you have to pay zakat. If you're below the Niṣāb on your zakat date, then you don't have to pay zakat. So it's about, you need to have a, you need to be above the Niṣāb at the beginning and the end of the year. The only time that your zakat date is going to reset, the only time your zakat date is going to reset is if all of your wealth goes right down into zero and you've spent everything and you have absolutely no zakatable assets, or you have more debt than you have zakatable assets. So you've got £500, but you've got £1,000 of debt, for example. Now you're in minus. So if you go into zero or minus, then you need to restart the process again. So you're going to look at the first time you go above the Niṣāb, and then look at 1 year from then on, are you above the Niṣāb? If so, then you give zakat, and if not, then you don't give zakat. Okay, so that's the only time you're going to reset your zakat date. So to summarize, when you go above Niṣāb the first time, 1 year from then on, if you're above Niṣāb, that is your zakat date. Now every year on that date, you're going to pay zakat. If you're below, the first time you're fixing the zakat date, if you're below, then obviously you didn't fix the zakat date. But if you did fix the zakat date, and that is your date now, every year 10th of Muharram is your zakat date. If you end up below 10th zakat threshold, Niṣāb threshold on that day, you're not going to pay zakat. But your date is going to stay. The only time your date resets is if you go down to zero, then you start the process again. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you the next slide, and I want you guys to tell me when is this person's zakat date? What is that person's zakat date? When do they have to work it out? So use the chat section for this and let me know what you guys think, when the zakat date is and why. Okay, someone's saying Ramadan. Why do you think it's Ramadan? And someone's saying Safar. Why do you think it's Safar? Give me the why for both of them. I'll let you guys answer while I quickly flick through this. Okay, Ramadan because the first attained Niṣāb. Someone's saying Ramadan because the first attained Niṣāb. But if we consider, oh sorry, I didn't clarify that the bottom black line is 0, right? A person's assets have all gone. And the red line is your Niṣāb. Suffer because you're above the Zakat date. Ramadan, you're on the Niṣāb amount. They did not have the Niṣāb in Ramadan after 1 year. Ramadan because it's the start and end of the Islamic year. No Niṣāb. The person reaches 0 after Ramadan, so it resets. Good. Now we're getting more technical. And then he reaches, okay, good. Okay, so that's what we're looking for, right? So let's have a look at this now. Ramadan, a person went over Niṣāb. So now what they're going to do is they're going to look from Ramadan to the next Ramadan. Do they have Niṣāb? However, what do we see? We see that halfway through the year, the person went to 0. Now, because they went to 0, this is cancelled out. We're not going to take this to consideration anymore. The fact that they went to Niṣāb because they went to 0. So we're going to look, all the assets went, Zakatable assets went. Now, when is the first time that they go above Niṣāb again? It's, just say, the 1st of Safar. So now they're going to look, okay, what about next year in the 1st of Safar? Are they above Niṣāb? So at the start of this year, the start of the year and at the end of the year, both times they are above Niṣāb, even though they went below and they went above, but at the start they were above and at the end they were above. So that is now the person's Zakat date, and every year they're going to stick to that date now going forward. Okay, they're going to stick to that date going forward. There's going to be no more movement of that date unless they reach 0. Okay, so that date is fixed, 1st of Safar. Every year, 1st of Safar, if they have Niṣāb, they pay Zakat. If they don't pay Zakat. That date does not change unless you hit 0. Okay, hopefully that should make sense. If everyone's okay with that in the chat, just give me a yes or a thumbs up or whatever, just to show that you've understood and everyone's got this concept. Yeah, so if you're asking about whether it shifts, the only time it shifts is if you hit 0. Otherwise, it's always going to stay the same. Okay, let's move on. There are certain things that people are missing as we go along. If you miss it, I would advise that you use the recordings after to go back, because 2 hours is very short and we've already used up 45 minutes. Now, if a person can't go back and remember the Niṣāb, for example, they can't remember, they haven't paid Zakat for 10 years and they realize I should be paying Zakat, I need to go back and work out when my first Niṣāb date was. They can use bank statements and stuff to try and work out. If you can't work it out, then what you're going to do is you're going to make an estimate, trying to whatever information you have available. And if you can't even make an estimate, then what you need to do is you need to fix a date. And that is going to be your Zakat date. So for example, it doesn't have to be Ramadan, it can be Ramadan. Just say 10th of Ramadan, you say that's my Zakat date and you fix it. Now, if you have Niṣāb on the 10th of Ramadan, you pay Zakat, and if you don't pay Zakat. That date is now not going to change once you fix, unless what happens? You go to 0. Okay, that's the only time you play around. Your date is going to shift. Okay, so that's the introduction to Niṣāb and the threshold of how much wealth you have to pay Zakat on. And we've also determined a Zakat date. So 2 very important things regarding Zakat. Now, the third important discussion regarding Zakat is what type of wealth is Zakat obligatory upon? What kind of wealth do I have to pay Zakat on? Do I have to pay Zakat on my house, my car? Do I have to pay Zakat on loans that I've taken? Do I have to pay Zakat on finances that I've taken, or bursaries? So that's where all of this is going to be discussed. So inshallah, this should answer a lot of the questions that have come in. You pay Zakat on only 4 things. Okay, we'll only look at 4 things: cash, gold, silver, merchandise, stock. We're going to look at what it means, what stock means. There are only certain assets that you pay Zakat on. So cash, gold, silver, and stock. Stock is something you bought for the purpose of selling. There's livestock as well, but we're not going to deal with livestock. There's a whole different Zakat calculation for livestock, and most people won't have livestock. So we're sticking to the main 4: cash, gold, silver, merchandise. I'm going to keep repeating it because that needs to drill into your head. Cash, gold, silver, merchandise. That's the 4 things that you pay Zakat on, nothing else. Now let's break these down. Cash. Whether you've got cash in the bank, whether you've got cash at home in your wallet, whether it's in any currency, you went on holiday, you came back, you've got some different currencies in your cupboard, all of that is Zakatable. So you have to add all of that together and see how much it is. Okay? Sometimes, just remember, sometimes you may have given someone money to borrow, or somebody owes you money. Okay? You may have to pay Zakat on that, but we've got a slide to determine when you have to and when you don't have to. So cash, you have on your zakat date, you have to pay zakat on, and maybe even money you've given to someone else and money that somebody owes you. So that's cash. Gold and silver. Gold and silver is zakatable, depend whatever form it's in. So whether it's those nuggets, biscuits, whatever you want to call them, coins, blocks, bars, jewelry, whatever it is, if it's gold and silver, you have to pay zakat on the value of it. Okay. Now remember, the item in Islam has to be more than 50% gold or silver for it to be considered a gold item. Okay. So if something is, you have 24 karat gold, which is pure gold, right? Now you don't always have pure gold. Sometimes the gold is mixed with other metals to make a gold item, but it's got a mixture of other metals inside it. Now, do you have to pay zakat on that or not? If most of the item is made more than 50% or more is gold, then it's a gold item and you have to pay zakat on it. If less than 50% is gold, then you don't have to pay zakat on it. Now, how do you determine that? You have the purity scale, right? So you have carat. So 24 karat being pure gold, 12 is half. If it's 24 karat, it's only gold. If it's 12 karat, that means it's half gold, half other metals. If it's 18 karat, that means it's about 75% gold and then other metals. So you will pay zakat on all of those. If it's 9 karat gold, that means it's less than half. So less than half of it is gold. So you don't need to pay zakat on that. Similarly, if something is gold plated, obviously the item that means is metal, but you've got plating of gold over it. So that's not going to be zakatable because it's just plated. Most of it actually metal. So what do? There's two bits of information that you need regarding the gold item. Number one, you need to know the weight of it. Now, ideally, when you buy the item, you should try and keep a record of this because you're going to have to keep paying zakat on it. The weight of the gold and silver. And number two, the purity. Okay. And you take the weight of the gold. So let's say it's 24 karat gold and it weighs whatever, 50 grams, right? So 50 grams or whatever. I'm just making some numbers up, right? You work out the price of gold per gram. Okay, you just go online, you look for gold per gram, and it'll give you the current day, your zakat day will tell you what the price of gold is per gram. Then you multiply by how many grams of gold that you have, and then you add that to your balance of your zakatable assets, and then you pay zakat accordingly. When you're calculating the price, if the jewelry has like other big jewels and pearls on it that are quite heavy and that are not gold or silver, then you don't need to factor that into the weight. So if you can deduct the weight of that, because you only need to pay zakat of the gold and silver. So you're only going to pay zakat on the gold and silver. If there's any questions on this so far, then this is a good time to ask regarding the gold and silver and cash. So find out the weight of your gold item, find out the price of gold today on your zakat date, multiply the two. You got 100 grams of gold and the gold price today is 40 pounds per gram, multiply the two, that's the value roughly of your item. So you're going to add that to your zakatable assets when you're doing your calculation. There's a lot of these questions. If you know you're going to buy a gift for yourself, we're going to deal with all of that later, inshallah. If you have gold less than 24 karat, then do you still multiply? Yeah. So no, you're going to use the price. So for example, you'll have the price of 24 karat gold, you'll have the price of 18 karat gold, you'll have the price for 12 karat gold. So because you're paying proportionately to how much gold is in the item, if you go by the carat price, then you'll be able, that's a good question, you'll be able to work out how much that gold is actually worth. Because if you're going to go by pure carat, you're actually paying more than the value according to the value of that gold. Well, mixed assets, you're going to add it all together. So you've got a bit of gold, which is less than Niṣāb, a bit of cash, which is less than Niṣāb, a bit of silver, less than Niṣāb. You're going to add it all together. If all of it goes above Niṣāb, then you pay the zakat on it. Okay, I'm going to move forward. And then we'll come back to the questions, inshallah. Trying to deal with as many questions as I can, and then, but we have to move forward as much as we can as well, otherwise we're not going to have enough time to finish. Money owed to you. Now, I said that you have to pay zakat on cash. Now, sometimes somebody owes you money, you may have to factor that in. So, for example, if I give somebody a loan of £1,000, you may have to factor that in and pay zakat on that £1,000, depending on who's given the money to and why they owe you. Okay. Look at this slide. The money you are owed is going to be one of three categories, and we're going to term them as strong debt, medium debt, and a weak debt. Okay. Now we're going to look at strong and weak first. That's the most important one. Then we look at medium at the end. So just understand this. Okay. Strong debt. Quickly, someone tell me in the chat, what are the zakatable assets? Let's just see if everybody's awake. Cash, good. What else? Gold, silver, cash, stock, good. Okay. So you've got zakatable assets, cash, gold, silver, and stock. If you have any of those four, okay, listen carefully. If you have any of those four already and you own it, and you give it to somebody else to borrow. Now, when you give it to somebody else to borrow, you've not passed ownership over. It's still yours. They just have it borrowed. Okay, that is still yours. You still have to pay zakat on that. If I give somebody a loan of £1,000 for 4 years, 2020 this year, I gave somebody a loan of £4,000. So 2021 comes, my zakat date. I don't have that £1,000 because I've given it as a loan, but it's mine. So I need to factor that in and I add that to my assets. And I factor that in and I pay 2.5% of that also. So if I've got £1,000 in my bank and I've got £1,000 which I've loaned to somebody else, or I've put it into an investment, then I need to pay a zakat on £2,000. The £1,000 in my bank and the £1,000 which I've given to somebody as a loan. Okay. There is discretion if you want to. If you want to, what you can do is you can wait till year 4 and the person pays you the £1,000 back. But then you pay zakat, but you'll have to backdate for those years that you didn't pay. If you wanted, during those 4 years, you can just pay zakat on the money that's in your bank and not pay on this money and wait for it to be received. And then after the four years, when you receive the money back, you then have to backdate those 4 years which you didn't pay zakat for the item. But if you have zakatable assets, cash, gold, silver, merchandise, which you've given to somebody else and they owe you, that is zakatable and you still have to pay it. Liability is now. Similarly, remember, this is also a very important one. If you have merchandise, a zakatable product, remember, a zakatable product is something you've purchased for the purpose of selling. If I buy a car for the purpose of selling, that becomes merchandise and I have to pay zakat on it. If I have sold that on credit and a person owes me money for that, why do they owe me money? They owe me money in consideration for a zakatable item. Just like when I gave them cash, they owe me that cash for the cash, which is zakatable. Similarly, here they owe me money for the zakatable item. So I sold my business car for £1,000. Now I have to pay zakat on. I have to factor that in. Again, you can wait till they pay you and backdate if you want to. But there's certain complications with that, which I will explain in the next slide. But that's the idea. General idea regarding zakatable assets is if you've had it and you've given it to someone, you still have to factor that in. Similarly, if you've sold merchandise and they owe you money and it's your zakat date and they still haven't paid you, you have to factor that in and you have to pay zakat on that also. Now, weak debt, the difference between a strong and a weak debt is, in a weak debt, it wasn't zakatable assets that you are owed, right? You didn't have zakatable assets which you gave to somebody else. Rather, somebody just owes you for some other reason, okay? With a weak debt, the ruling is you don't have to pay zakat until you receive the item back, until you receive the item. So once you get the money after like 4 or 5 years, you only pay zakat from that time on. You don't have to pay zakat for those years. Now, what are those kind of wealth? And this is very important here to understand this because a lot of the money that we are owed will fall into this. Somebody owes you wages. Just say you had a side job with somebody and you've been working for them for multiple years. They haven't paid you for about 4 or 5 years and they owe you like £5,000, okay? Or £15,000. They owe you £15,000. After 4 years, they give you a lump sum of £15,000, right? In consideration for your work. That is a weak debt. You only have to pay zakat after you've received that money. Going forward, you don't have to backdate for those years that the person owed you. Similarly, if a person hasn't paid their rent for multiple years and then they give you a lump sum of rent, then you only pay going forward when you receive it. If a woman is owed her bahar, husband pays after like 20 years after getting married, she doesn't have to backdate all of those years, only when she receives it. And if someone's passed away and you receive inheritance, only once you receive it going forward, you pay zakat. You don't have to pay zakat, backdate. So the backdating strong debt is only when you have a zakatable asset which you've given to somebody, or you've sold a zakatable asset and they owe you. That is a very strong debt. So zakat liability is immediate and you have to pay immediately, even if you don't have that amount with you at this moment in time. If you want to pay later, you can pay later, but you will have to backdate for all those years you didn't pay zakat. A weak debt is when somebody owes you for some other reason, right? You didn't give them money, they owe you for a service or for rental or for mahar or anything like that. Same as if, for example, you go to university and you're given a grant or a bursary, and they said that they're going to pay you the grant, but they've not been paying you, and they're delaying, and a couple of years have come past, let's say, for example, right? And then eventually you manage to get that bursary. That wasn't money you gave to them, which they're giving you back. That's just new wealth, totally new. So you only pay on that once you receive it. You don't have to backdate. The only confusing one, well, not confusing, the only one where there's a difference of opinion is the medium debt. Now, there's two opinions. Some classify a medium debt with strong debt, and some classify medium debt with a weak debt. And that makes a difference on whether you have to backdate or not. Medium debt is, now let's understand again, strong debt. What did I say? A zakatable asset. So something you purchased for the purpose of selling, you sold that on credit and the person owes you, that's strong debt. But if you sell something which is personal, so you sold your personal house, it wasn't for the purpose of selling, it's a personal house, or you sold your own car, which isn't zakatable. You sold your own laptop, which isn't zakatable. And now a person owes you for that, and your zakat date comes and they haven't paid you. Do you need to pay zakat now, or do you only have to pay zakat when you receive it? There's two opinions, okay? And these, in this case, I would say that both opinions are quite strong. You're free to choose whichever position you want, okay? Some say it's like a strong debt, some say it's like a weak debt. At the moment, personally, I go with the fact that it's more like a weak debt based on the reading that I've done and some of the opinions that I've held. So, that, for example, a case that came to us was two siblings purchased a house for themselves. After a few years, one sibling decided that I'm going to sell my half of the house to you, and the sibling's going to pay them after 10 years. Okay, so they sold a personal house to somebody who's going to pay them after 10 years. Now, it wasn't a zakatable house, it was a personal house. So during that 10 years, when the person owes them, they don't, if they wanted to, they can consider it a weak debt and they don't have to pay zakat on that amount going for those years. Okay, if they want to consider it a strong debt, they can also do that and pay backdate. It just depends. Like, if it's such a large amount, then you may want to put it into a weak debt. If it's just a small amount, then there should be no harm in putting it into a strong debt. Let's take questions on this slide through the Q&A. So if anyone has any questions, then type those in regarding this slide, and I will address them. But this is a very important section. I have mixed assets. I've done that one. Is it when do you have to pay? I'll deal with that later. If I sold some goods to someone and then I received money, I then paid zakat on it. If afterwards they wanted a refund and I give them the goods back, what do I do about the extra zakat I paid? Can I take it off the money? No, because at that moment in time, you paid zakat on it, right? So at that moment in time, that cash came into you, that belongs to you. So that is your zakat. You've paid zakat on it, it's done. And then later on, if you refund, that's a bit like you kind of selling it back again, right? So then when they give you the money back, and you get the product back, then the zakat is going to continue. I hope that answers the question. Which type of debt is mortgage? Okay, we're going to look at when you deduct those kind of debts. We're going to look at later on, inshallah. Mortgage, student finance, that's all going to come later on, inshallah. That comes under. So remember, these, what you're talking about in terms of mortgage payments and stuff, that's going to come under deductibles. So can I deduct something that I owe? Because you owe the mortgage payment, right? Someone doesn't owe you the mortgage payment. You owe the mortgage payment, you owe the student loan, etc. So we're going to deal with that, inshallah. Okay, let's move on, since that seems to have covered that second. Right. Backdating, just don't worry about the details of this slide. I'm just going to summarize it for you. You know, when I said that if you gave someone £1,000 to borrow for the duration of 4 years, right? You have the option, which you should be paying immediately as you go along, or you can backdate and pay once you receive it. Now remember, when you receive the money back, the £1,000 in year 4, and you're going to backdate those 4 years and pay zakat for those 4 years, it's not always £1,000 that you're going to work 2.5% off, because year 1 of that money, which they had, and you haven't paid zakat for yet, you're backdating. Year 1, £1,000, you pay 2.5% of that, which is how much? £25. Now, when you do zakat for year 2, out of that £1,000, remember, £25 is zakat for year 1, so you can minus the £25. Now you're only going to pay zakat on 975, because that's what remains, so 2.5% of 975. And then in year 3, you can deduct year 1 and year 2 zakat, and you only pay because you're backdating. You're paying zakat on all of this as the years go along. So you can do that. If it's a small sum like £1,000 over 4 years, it's not going to make much difference. But if somebody's borrowed somebody 50, 60, 70,000 pounds for like 20, 30 years, this can make a big difference. So when it comes to backdating, you can separate how much is zakatable and how much is the zakat for the previous years and how much is the actual capital that remains. You pay zakat accordingly. Okay, now we're going to look at merchandise. So we've covered cash, gold, silver, money that people owe you. Okay, now we're looking at stock. When is something considered a zakatable item? I bought a car for myself yesterday, for example. Do I have to pay zakat on the value of that car? In order for an item to be considered zakatable, intention must be made at the time of purchase that the item is to be sold and not for personal use. Remember this is the most important principle when it comes to merchandise. If at the time of buying an item, your intention was clear cut that I am buying this only for the purpose of selling this, that becomes zakatable. I am buying this car to sell the car. I am buying this laptop to sell this laptop. I am buying this house to sell the house. I am buying these pots and pans to sell in my shop. Then it becomes merchandise and it becomes zakatable, and you look at the value of that and you pay zakat on that accordingly. If you had like a half-half intention, I'm going to buy this, I'm going to keep it for myself. If someone gives me a good offer, I might sell it. Okay, that's not zakatable anymore because it's not a 100% clear-cut zakatable intention. Just like this, if you bought something with the intention of selling it, and then later on you decided to keep it for yourself. So I bought this laptop that I've got here to sell. And then someone told me, actually, you bought that for a really good price. Why don't you just keep it? It's a really good laptop. And I'm like, okay, I'm going to keep the laptop now. It's mine. I'm going to keep it for myself. It's no longer zakatable because it's now personal. It won't become zakatable again now. Only if you buy something for the purpose of selling and you keep it for that intention, it becomes zakatable. Otherwise, it's not. My personal items that I buy for my own use, my own house, my own car, my own laptop, if I end up putting that up for sale, so I put my car up for sale yesterday and today's my zakat date, it's a personal car that I'm putting up for sale. I don't need to factor the price of that car into my zakat date. Okay, how do you value that? How do you value the product? Okay, I bought a laptop 2 years ago for £500. Today, the value of that laptop went up somehow and it's worth £700. What I'm going to do is on the zakat date, the value of the item on the zakat date in the market, roughly whatever the price would be, what it would sell for, that is the price you mark it at. You calculate the zakat at. You don't calculate on how much you purchased it for. It's how much it goes for in the market today on your zakat date. That's the price you value it at. Sometimes your stock, some might be different value, same product, but you're selling some wholesale, you're selling some retail. Just say you've got 1,000 books that you've purchased, 80% you're selling wholesale, 20% you're selling retail. 80% wholesale, you value that according to how much you would sell wholesale and do 2.5% of that. Retail, depending on how much that would cost selling at retail, then you do 2.5% of that and then you put the amount together. If the value has totally gone, let's say you bought something 5 years ago, was selling really well, everybody was buying it, it was a really good book out, everybody's buying it, you published it and everyone's buying it, then all of a sudden someone makes a PDF and it's out in the market and no one's buying your book anymore, right? Not even shifting for £1, 50p, 10p, whatever, right? It's not shifting, it's dead stock, for example. Then you value according to whatever the value is today. So if it's dead stock, it has no value, then it's worth £1 and it's worth £1. Okay, so whatever the value is on the zakat date. Now, what items do you have to pay zakat on if you have like a business? Remember the most important thing, anything that you purchase for the purpose of selling or anything that you've purchased that's going to be sold to a customer. For example, I buy and sell cars, okay? So when I buy and sell cars, I'm going to have a showroom, I'm going to have a building, I'm going to have all sorts of different things. I'm going to have table chairs and all sorts, right, in the showroom. What am I buying and selling? I'm buying and selling the cars. So anything that I buy and sell, that is going to be zakatable. So all the cars that I have, they're zakatable. So their value on my zakat date, I have to work them out and pay. I don't have to pay in the building because I'm not selling the building. The table and chairs for the customers to sit on in the office, that's not zakatable. I don't have to factor that in, right? All of that kind of stuff, I don't have to factor in because they're not zakatable. Only thing that is zakatable is what I am purchasing for the purpose of selling. For cash, gold, silver, and anything you buy for the purpose of selling. Now I'm going to have a little break here. What I'm going to do is I've got a restaurant here that has all of these different things inside it on the zakat date. In the chat section, tell me which one of these items do you think are zakatable? So do they have to pay zakat on the vegetables that they have? It's a restaurant, right? What about the delivery car that makes the deliveries? They've got cash in the bank. Do they have to pay on that? What about decorations? What about the tables and chairs? What about the kitchen items? Based on the principles I just explained on merchandise, which one of these items are zakatable? You can use the chat to explain which ones you think are zakatable. I'm just looking through the questions are done. Okay, let me have a look at the chat. Okay, let's see what you guys have. So let me just go down a bit. Food packaging. Okay, yep, that's right. Food packaging. Why? Because when the customer buys a burger meal in a restaurant, for example, or a takeaway, they're getting I'm giving that over to the customer as well, right? It's part of what they paid for. Chairs. Ibrahim Abdul Rauf. Why do I pay the zakat on chairs in a restaurant? Am I selling the chairs? Someone said delivery car, no, because you're not selling it. That's right. Cash in the bank, yes, you're going to pay. Cash, drink, food, yes, all of that's going to the customer. That's right. Loans. If you're owed money, yes. So if the restaurant has given a loan to somebody, if they've given a loan to somebody, then they're going to have to pay zakat on it. Cash, money owed, food items, cash, packaging, drinks, meat, food, sugar, everything's coming in, right? Okay, let me pick some. What about the which one should I go for? What about salt? They've got bags and bags of salt. How are they going to factor that into their zakat? Yes. So someone's saying yes, you do. Okay, what price am I going to value it at? Because I'm not giving this customer the whole bag of salt. I'm giving them like probably sprinkles of salt, right? Whatever I'm putting into their food. So the bag of salt is still in a bag of salt, right? So how much would that bag go for today? Yeah. So how much would it cost you to sell that bag of salt exactly how it is? That's how you're going to value that. So yeah, meat, vegetables, salt, flour, all of these things are going to the customer. It's going into the final product. Anything that goes into the final product, let's say I'm a factory. So anything that goes into the final product which will be sold will be zakatable. If at the current stage it's raw material, even then the price of that will be as raw material. How much you will sell as raw material? It's a finished product, then the price of it as a finished product. I'm going to work out the price. So anything that is ultimately going to the customer as part of what they're paying for is going to be zakatable. So chairs and tables, no. Cutlery, no, because I'm not selling it unless you have a business of selling chairs and tables. Sugar, yes. A building, no. I don't pay zakat on the building because I'm not selling the building. Cash in the bank, yes. Delivery car, no. Cash machine, till, no. Food packaging, yes, because that's going to the customer. Table and tablecloth, no. Decorations, no. Yes, if you have gold decorations, mashallah, then you pay zakat on the gold, of course. Drinks to the customer, yes. Utensils, no. Because you're cooking with them, you're not actually selling that to the customer. And if you're owed money, like you gave a loan and you owed money, then yes. Okay. So let's have a look at this in terms of business terms, and then we'll take any questions that you have. Again, remember, for questions, try and use the Q&A section. For these discussions, then just use the so cash. The zakatable assets are cash that you're owed, that you have in the bank. Any cash receivables, so you've given a loan and they owe you money. Any trade receivables, so you've sold stock and they owe you money for the stock. That's a strong debt. So we've discussed that's zakatable. And any stock that you have, an inventory that you have at that moment, that is also zakatable. If you owe money for a service, that's not zakatable. Yeah, that's not zakatable. When you receive the money, then you pay zakat on it. But if you're owed money for a service, then no, because it's not a strong debt. Prepaid expenses where you've already paid, you've already taken the money out of your account and you've paid for something, that cash is no longer yours, so you don't pay zakat on it. Fixtures, fitting, property, plant, equipment, all of that, obviously you don't pay zakat because you're not selling any of those. Intangible fixed assets, you don't have to pay zakat on, copyright, trademark, etc. Let's have a look at any questions that have come regarding this last part. If you know you are going to buy a gift, a big gift for yourself, like an expensive car, but your zakat is due that month, should you factor the money spent? Yeah, if you know you're going to buy something, then that's not really a debt. That's up to you if you want to buy that for yourself. And on that zakat date, if you have that cash, you have to pay zakat on that cash, even if you've been saving up for something. If you've already spent the money, it's gone, right? And we're going to look at debts, what you can deduct. So some of that should be answered. Do I pay zakat on gold and separate cash? And then you add all your merchandise. So how much does your zakat gold cost? How much cash do you have? Bring all of that together. Akbar is saying there's one question. Is cash in bank or business zakatable? Is it in addition to zakat on the profit made with? Yeah. So the cash that you have in the bank as for the business, the cash that it has is also zakatable. Any profits that are made that come before the zakat date have to be factored in. So remember, we don't look at profit and loss. We're looking at what you have on your zakat date. So if you have something on your zakat date, you're going to have to pay zakat on it, okay? Regardless of when it came in. So if it came the day before your zakat date, you have to factor that in. If you spent it before your zakat date, then you don't have to pay zakat on that. Okay, let me go through deductibles because that will also discuss some of the questions that have come in, because a lot of these questions that are coming in, they related to things that are still going to come. So inshallah, and then what we have, if I have any questions at the end that I have not answered, we'll try and flick through as much as we can. Allahu Ta'ala. Okay, now remember, we've discussed what you have to pay zakat on. So cash, gold, silver, merchandise, money that people owe you if it's a strong debt. Now you add all of that together. Now there are certain things that you can deduct. Okay, there are certain amounts that you can deduct. So for example, if my bills for last year have come in, my water, gas, electricity bills have all come in, then I can deduct some of those. So what can you deduct? What can't you deduct? So if you have a debt which is already owed, so you owe this already, right? Then you can deduct that. So for example, previous bills that have come in, previous bills that have come in, previous bills that have come in. So January, February, March, April, right? Those bills have already come in. I haven't paid them yet. And they total about £300 and I have £1,000 in my bank. Because these are debts that are already liable only at this moment in time, I can deduct that. So I'll only pay on the remaining £700 that I have in my bank. Future debts, you're not allowed. So I can't say, oh, in June, July, August, September, I'm going to have about £300 worth of bills. So I'm going to factor that in and deduct that. No, because that's not liable on you on your zakat date. It's all about what you have on your zakat date. That is very important to determine. You can deduct anything that's already liable. Okay. Now, the only different scenario here is sometimes you will have a very, very long-term debt that you have to pay off. For example, a mortgage payment, as some people ask about, right? So we're not going into the halal and the haram of what's allowed and what's not allowed. We're just talking about purely the zakat, okay? Now, a person has a £300,000 mortgage, okay? Now, technically, that's a debt on the person because they've borrowed £300,000 and they need to pay it back. So if I go by the strict rules of debt, I can deduct £300,000, right? Which means I don't have to pay zakat and I can probably even be eligible to receive zakat. Now, long-term debts like that, you're not allowed to deduct the whole amount. The reason being, a debt is something which people are after you. They want you to pay the amount. The bank or whoever's giving you the mortgage is not even asking you for, you've got 30 years of debt, of mortgage payments to pay. They're not asking you for year 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, and all of the years after. In fact, with some plans, if you even pay early, you might even get fined for it. You might even get punished for paying early, for example. So what the ulama have said is you are allowed to deduct. You're allowed to deduct. You're allowed to deduct how many payments you're going to make in the coming year only. But that is for an extremely long-term loan debt. Okay. So for example, I'm allowed to deduct any debts that I owe, my any bills and electricity bills or whatever that I have, because that's already on me, so I can deduct those. And my long-term debt that I have over 30 years, which I have to pay, I can only deduct the amount which I have to pay within 1 year. So just say between my Zakat date and next Zakat date, I have to pay them back £10,000, and I've got £20,000 in my bank. So from that £20,000, I can deduct 10,000 because that's what I have to pay back in the year. You can't deduct any more than that. So you only have discretion to deduct the year's amount, not any more. But any other debts that are short-term debts or something you have to pay, but it's already liable that you can pay within 2 months or 3 months or 6 months, that is a debt, you can factor that in. Okay, you can factor that into something. But if it's a future debt, if it's something that's going to happen in the future, it's not even liable on you at this moment in time. I'm going to build an extension to my house next month and I haven't even started paying anyone for that or even gone into a contract for that. Then you can't deduct that because that's not something that is already liable on you at the moment. Now, when we talk about what you can deduct from this mortgage payment, it's only the capital, the loan, not the interest. You are not allowed to deduct. You shouldn't be paying interest. You shouldn't be taking interest. Let alone deduct, use that as a form of deduction. Okay. So this next slide actually explains what you can't deduct. Future bills and expenses that aren't liable on you at the moment, you can't deduct interest. Okay. And similarly, you don't pay zakat on haram income like interest. If you have interest, if you happen to have it, or you sold some items that you shouldn't be selling, lottery tickets, alcohol, etc., any income from there you don't pay zakat on, you have to dispose of that. You have to give that into charity. Either return it to the person that you got it from. If you can't do that, then you give it in charity without any intention for reward. It's disposing of haram well, so you don't pay zakat on that. Okay, let's take some questions on this section. Seems like a lot of questions are coming in. MashaAllah. What is considered a long-term debt? Yeah, so the barrier to that is not 100% clearly defined. If it's something like some ulama go by a year, anything that's beyond a year is going to be a long-term debt. So you can only deduct whatever is due within that year. Other ulama have a bit more of a relaxed approach, and they say if it's something within a couple of years, they just say something you have to pay within 2 years, and you're actively trying to pay it off before the 2 years are up, and then you can deduct that all. Okay, but a lot of ulama go by the 1 year. So anything beyond a year will be a long-term debt. What if somebody gave me a large loan but did not stipulate when they want the money back? Then how do I establish what I owe? You're going to have to determine that with them. Islamically, remember, when it comes to finance, everything has to be written down. Okay, we don't want any disputes in Islam. Financial agreements have a lot of dispute. So you need to stipulate a term that by this time, you need to pay me back. And if the person wants to then extend, they can keep extending it, but you need to determine with that person. Online zakat calculator is reliable. I haven't used the online zakat calculator. I know there are some, and some I would assume that they're going to be reliable, but I can't vouch for any particular reliable calculator personally. Now that question about buying a gift for yourself, again, you're buying that for yourself. So if I put money aside to buy a car next month, and my zakat date comes before I bought the car, that money I have to pay zakat on because it's cash that I have. If I have bought a car already and I owe them money and I have to pay them within 6 months, yes, I can deduct that because that's a short-term loan, a short-term debt that I have to pay off. I can deduct that. Okay, I hope I have answered some of those questions that relate to that. I know I'm flying. We have to fly because it's about our time. I think it's time to fly, inshallah. People have questions regarding shares, and a lot of these questions were asked at the beginning as well. So let's get into shares and pensions for those that have shares and pensions. If you don't have shares and pensions, then I would tell you to try and still focus on this section because it might get a bit technical, but you know what, it'll develop your faqaha. And at the end of the day, we're trying to develop our mind to understand how fiqh works and how the fiqh of zakat works. So we don't what's relevant to me and my family. Sciences, inshallah ta'ala, going forward and just build on our knowledge and understanding. So let's have a look. So that question regarding mortgage payments, I've covered that, inshallah. Student finance debt, again, that's a good question actually. If I'm a student and I've got a student loan of 30, we're not going to the halal and the haram. If I'm a student loan, I don't have to pay that amount back at the moment anyway, right? I can't factor that into it as a debt. Yeah, when I have to start paying that loan back. Those deductions that they're going to make monthly, they're going to make those deductions anyway. So if on your zakat date, you may be able to just deduct that month, but nothing beyond that, because you're only going to be, you don't have to, it's not liable on you until that time. Let's have a look at shares and pensions, right? Now, what do we have here? When a person buys a share, there's two things that you're either going to buy a share for the purpose of selling the share. Okay, now you need to go back and start thinking about your tijara and your merchandise. If you buy a share for the purpose of selling the share, then your whole share had become like a merchandise, because you're buying the share to sell, right? So you bought a share, the value of it is £1,000, and your intention is to sell that share. So on your zakat date, that whole, whatever the value is of the share, the whole value is zakatable, and you pay 2.5% of that, and you add it to all your zakatable assets. If, however, you bought a share long term, most people buy shares to sell, right? If you bought a share for long term benefit, to gain benefit from the dividends that are going to come over time, then what happens here is you're basically a shareholder in the company. Now, if you have a company and you're a shareholder in that company, remember, in any business, you don't pay zakat 100% on all the business assets, right? You only pay zakat, as we discussed, on the zakatable assets of a business. And if you are a shareholder in a business, you're only going to pay proportionately to the zakatable assets of that business. Now, I'm going to run you through a process here and then give you a shortcut as well, inshallah ta'ala, so it doesn't get too complicated. Let's say the business you've invested in, that you have shares in, you've got 100% assets, right? Of those assets, just say 20% are zakatable. So what do we pay zakat on? The business has cash, gold, silver, merchandise. They're only going to pay zakat on those assets, right? So you only have to pay zakat according to those assets. So just say the structure of the company is such that only 20% of the business has zakatable assets. The other 80% are non-zakatable assets. Now your share value today on your zakat date is £1,000, for example. Now you don't have to pay zakat 2.5% of the £1,000. Why? Because not the whole £1,000 is zakatable, right? Because you have a share in a business which is made up of zakatable and non-zakatable. So your £1,000 share value reflects zakatable and non-zakatable assets. So if only 20% of the business is zakatable assets, then you only pay 20% of your share value. In this case, £200. So it's only pay zakat on £200, which is 2.5% of that, which is £5. Okay, so you're going to have to go to the balance sheet of the companies that you have shares in, and you're going to have to look at the assets, and then you go through the assets and you look at current assets, you look at cash receivables, trade receivables, all inventory, all of that kind of stuff, and you see how much of the total assets of the company does this make up, and then you're able to work out the percentage of zakatable assets of the company. Then whatever your share value is, you do the proportion just like I've showed you. If this is difficult and you're not able to do this, then some ulama, what they've done is they've created and determined certain proxies that you can use. So for example, if you're not able to go into the details and you don't know how to work this out, and this is quite difficult, it might be quite difficult for certain people depending on how many shares and stuff you have, you can use a proxy and just assume that 40% of your holding, of your shares are zakatable. Just assume that 40% are zakatable assets and the 60% are not zakatable assets. Some people have further revised that and said 20%, 25% are zakatable and the rest is not zakatable. However, you have to be very cautious here because it depends on what you are investing in. Because we're ultimately trying to determine how many zakatable assets that company has. If it's a company that deals mainly in cash and has a lot of cash and a lot of inventory, right, a lot of stock, then their zakatable assets are going to be more than their non-zakatable assets. So that percentage is going to fluctuate. So again, if you're buying a share to sell the share, you pay 2.5% on the whole thing. If you're buying to keep long term, then if you want to pay 2.5% on the whole thing, that's possible, then do that. That's just the most safest way to do it. But if you want, then you can go into the detail of it and find work out the zakatable, non-zakatable assets and only pay proportionately. Let's see if any questions have come in on this stock. And just to clarify, zakat on loans is deducted to the amount owed for the following 12 months. Yeah, anything that you owe. So if it's already owed, you already owe it. You've already borrowed money and you owe it, and it's a long term, you can pay back in 4 or 5 years, for example. Whatever payments you have to make within 12 months, you can deduct that. When you have to pay zakat, we'll deal with that later, inshallah. Okay, let's look at pensions. Pensions is a bit more important now because a lot of people have pensions. Now, when it comes to pensions, there are two types of pensions. Now, bring a break. There's two types of pension. You have a zakatable and a non-zakatable, obviously, right? Now, I'm going to take you back. Forget the information on the screen for now. Let me take you back. There are certain things that are going to be deducted which are mandatory. You have absolutely no choice. For example, in this country, we have national insurance contribution, right? And that goes towards a state pension. Part of it goes towards a state pension, or determines what kind of pension you're going to be receiving. You did not have a choice to opt into the state pension, and you did not have a choice to opt out, for example. Okay, your national insurance contributions were deducted regardless. You did not have a choice in that. So because that was deducted regardless, and that's not zakatable, so we don't need to worry about any of that. What we are worried about is workplace pensions, money purchase plans. They're mainly called defined contribution plans, defined contribution pensions. So money purchase, self-investment purchase. So these are essentially pensions where what happens is from your wage, either you paid your wage and you've just taken your money and put it into a pension, right? Or the other option is your employer deducts a certain amount from your wage, so just say 5%, and they put it into a pension fund. And they match that. They might match that with 5% or 6%, and they will also put that as a gift into the pension fund. Okay. Now that amount of money which has been deducted from your wage and has gone into the pension fund, you haven't received it yet. So the question is, do I have to pay zakat on that because it's not mine? Now, this is where the technical part is, which is really, really important to understand. Who is that pension fund working for? If it's a defined contribution pension scheme, money purchase, self-investment, any of those types of pension schemes, then that pension fund is going to be working for the employee, for you, the worker, right? So that deduction from your wage, even though you didn't take physical possession of it, it didn't come into your bank. What happens is when they give it to the pension fund who are going to be investing it, pension company who are going to be investing it, when that pension fund takes hold of that amount, they're ultimately taking hold of that on your behalf. But it's as though they've taken possession on your behalf. When they've taken possession of that, that then becomes your wealth. Now, when they then invest that, that is you making an investment. So you have to pay zakat on your pension fund. Okay. Now, with this type of pension fund, which is working for the employee, remember, if there's a lot of benefit, if that pension fund investment does really well and makes a lot of money, then you're going to take benefit from that. And if it makes a lot of loss, you're going to bear the loss for that because the pension fund is investing on your behalf. So these types of pension funds are zakatable. So look at your pension fund, how much is in there, you have to pay zakat on that. You might not have to pay zakat on the whole thing. The next slide will explain to you how much you have to pay zakat on. Now, there's one more scenario. That scenario is sometimes the pension fund is not investing on behalf of the employee, it's investing on behalf of the employer. Now, this is called a defined benefit scheme. And they're becoming more and more uncommon. Most likely, if you're working for a for NHS, public sector, you're working TFL underground, you're working in schools, you may have a defined benefit scheme. Now, the reason why a defined benefit scheme is not zakatable, a defined benefit scheme is not zakatable, because when the employer deducts from your wage and puts in the pension fund, that pension fund is not working for the employee, it's working for the employer. Okay? The pension fund is working for the employer and is investing on behalf of the employer. Any benefits or loss that's made in that investment is on the employer. And what the employer has said is basically when you retire, they're going to pay you a set salary regardless, right? Whether it's final salary scheme or average career salary, or whatever it is, they say that they're going to pay you, depending on certain formulas, they're going to pay you a salary regardless of how that pension fund works. Now, that is not zakatable at the moment because the investment is being done on behalf of the employer. So all of that wealth has not come into your possession. It's not your investment. So with a defined benefit scheme, you only pay zakat once you start getting that money into your possession, once the employer starts paying you. So you don't have to pay for the 10, 20, or 30 years that you have during your employment. However, most people will have a defined contribution money purchase plan, which is investing on your behalf, and you bear risk and loss. You have to then pay zakat on that. The question is, how much do you have to pay zakat on that? So let me explain that, then I'll take any questions in this section. Now, this is a bit of a funny, not funny, it's a bit of a scary slide, but we'll break it down, inshallah ta'ala. Remember, again, with a pension fund, it's just like shares. It's just like having shares in a business, because your pension pot is not just sitting there. It's not just your employer puts money in, you put money in, and that's it. It just sits there waiting, and that's it. You're going to get paid that at the end. No, that money is being invested. The question is, it's being invested into companies. Now, you don't have to pay zakat on all of that. Why? Because you only have to pay zakat on the zakatable assets of that company, which is being invested in. And that's really long. How are you going to go and determine that? How are you going to go and work that out? So some ulama, Mufti Faraz, I've taken this from Mufti Faraz, right? In Leicester. He's determined certain proxies that you can use, just like we did with shares. There are certain proxies that you can use. So what you do need to determine is, where is your pension being invested? So you find the name of your pension. I've picked up one random one here, right? Scottish Equitable, and it was a bad choice, because if you look at the breakdown, a lot of it is being invested in interest and stuff. Anyway, we're not looking at what is halal and what is haram. We're looking at zakat again. So you need to find out the asset class of your pension fund. So just say it's mixed assets, or it might be equity fund, or it might be property fund, it might be a Sharia fund, it might be any of these, right? This last one is usually impermissible anyway, because it deals with a lot of interest. It might be in any of these funds. Now, depending on where it is invested, you work out, you only have to pay zakat according to the zakatable assets, and these are proxies that you can work out. So for example, let's just take, for example, I have £10,000 in my pension fund today. My asset class is mixed assets. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say mixed asset fund, 50% is a zakatable. Of a mixed asset fund, only 50% is zakatable. So if in my pension fund today, on my zakat date, there are £10,000, only 50% is zakatable. So I only have to pay 2.5% of 50,000 of £10,000. I only have to pay on £5,000 and 2.5% of that. If it's invested in sometimes your pension may be invested in different asset classes, right? So then you'll just work out the percentage of each one and add them up. So for example, just say your pension is made up of 50% is invested in equity fund, of which 27% is only investable. So let me just do this, right? You've got, this is, everyone should be able to see this big box I'm drawing, right? 50% is in equity. So this is 50% of your pension is invested in equity, but only 27% of the entire fund is zakatable, right? So 27% of this entire fund is, 50% of your pension is in equity, only 27% of that is zakatable. So if you multiply the two together, 27% of 50% is 13.5%. So this is basically, this here represents 13.5% of your entire fund. Now you've got another 50% of your pension fund. This part is invested in property, of which only 15% is zakatable. So if you do 15% of this 50%, right, that is 7.5%. So 7.5% of this half of your pension fund is zakatable. Add your 7.5 from here, which is zakatable, and your 13.5% of this half is zakatable. So you add those together and you get your 21%. Well, after you've got your 21%, that means only 21% of your pension fund is zakatable. Okay, so you need to work it out based on your asset class. £1,000 in your pension fund, and half is in equity. 21% of your fund is zakatable. So out of the 10,000, only 2,100 is zakatable, and 2.5% of your 2,100 is £52.50. So for that year, you're going to pay £52.50. That's just a very random example that I just made for the purpose of being able to work out how much. You don't, if you want to plan the full pension fund, again, that's up to you. It just depends on where it's being invested. So you've got these proxies you can use to determine what percentage of your pension fund is actually zakatable, and pay 2.5% of that. So to summarize this whole section, you add gold, silver, cash, merchandise, shares and pensions, money that you're owed if it's a strong debt, add all of that together, deduct deduct any bills and fines that are already liable on you in the past and you have to pay them. Deduct any extra long-term loans that you have to pay up to a year's payments, right? Deduct all of that. Whatever you have left, you apply 2.5% of that and you pay zakat on that accordingly. Okay, that concludes our discussion on who has to pay zakat and how you have to pay zakat. Then we're going to go into the recipients. So if anyone has any questions here, this is a good time to discuss it. Do you pay zakat on the cost of the stock or the sale price? So what is the value? If you bought the stock to sell, right, then the whole stock share itself becomes zakatable. So whatever the price is on the zakat date, the value of it on the zakat date, that's how much you're going to pay for it, not for how much you purchased it for. That's done. That's done. You have to that one. That one. Long term. Done that one. That one. Alhamdulillah, we're going through some of these questions. Anything in the chat? Yeah. So a lot of people are asking about this. You didn't stipulate when this needs to be. You need to determine if it's not been stipulated, for example, and you have no payments that you have to make, then you can't really deduct that, right? Because you're not being asked for that money back at this moment. It's like a long-term debt where you don't have to pay right now. Yeah, that's why you need to have a stipulated date. You need to try and have a plan in place, and Islamically, we should do so. Whenever anything is sold on credit or borrowed, Islamically, you need to write it down. It's very, very important. So many questions come in. Parents passed away, and the entire family has just gone crazy because no one knows. Somebody's saying that, no, my parents borrowed this money from me. Someone saying no. That person saying no, they gave it to me as a gift. And there's so many disputes that break families apart because they weren't written down. That's why that verse in the Quran is so important. If you're going to have any sort of debts up to a deferred date, make sure you write everything down, and there needs to be clear rules and regulations put into place. Okay, what we're going to do is we're going to move on now into the recipients of zakat. If you want, we can have like a 3-minute breather, inshallah ta'ala. I think everyone needs to maybe just digest what has been said, maybe consolidate some notes. So let's just have a couple of minutes to breathe. I would say to have a cup of tea, but we can't because we're fasting. We'll just have to breathe instead. And then we're going to look at what you have to, who can you give zakat to. This question on zakat on gold. So you work out, again, if you've got 20 karat gold, I don't know if you get 20 karat gold, then you're going to work out the value of that 20 karat gold. So look at the price for that karat gold, and then how many grams of gold you have, and put it together. And then if it's below the Niṣāb, then it's below the Niṣāb. Most likely it's going to be above the Niṣāb. But also, if you have cash, then you're going to add that together as well. If I had a pension for the past 5 years, didn't pay any zakat on it, do I have to choose zakat on the value at year 1 and then value at year 2? So your pension statements will tell you how much you had each year. So use your pension statements to work out. So year 1, it'll tell you how much your pension fund was at year 1, and then pay zakat, and then year 2, year 3. Zakat can be given in anything. It doesn't have to be given in cash. It can be items, but we're going to discuss that, inshallah. Yeah, so again, I borrowed £20,000, but didn't have a set date of returning the money. So I've discussed that. If you haven't got a set date of when you need to return the money, then how can you consider that to be a deductible debt? Because there's no one actually asking you for that money at this moment in time. Yeah, if you're actively trying to pay off everything and you know that I want to pay this off within 1 year, or I want to pay it off within 18 months, and you're putting all your money towards it, then what you've done is you're now actually actively, you've made that into a debt which you're paying off. So technically it should be a debt that you can deduct 20,000, but you've not got a date of returning it. So it's like one of those long-term loans that someone's given you for 10 years. The ulama say you can only deduct that year's amount of payments. If you don't have that, you need to create some sort of plan and put that into place. Okay, bismillah, let's start. Let's continue. Let's carry on. Where are we? Recipients of zakat, masarif. So this verse is key when it comes to determining who the masarif are, who you can give zakat to. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Qur'an, إنما الصدقات للفقراء والمساكين والعاملين عليها والمؤلفة قلوبهم وفي الرقاب والغارمين وفي سبيل الله وابن السبيل. So these are the categories that you have to give zakat to. So for the poor, the needy, those employed to collect zakat, to those whose hearts to be won in the cause of the slaves, those burdened with debt, in the way of Allah, and to a traveler. So let's break down these 8 categories. So there are 8 categories of people that you can give zakat to. Not all of them apply today, and we're going to go through them. Some of them have difference of opinion among scholars, so we're going to have to go through them carefully. The first 2 categories of people are poor people. Now, we've done how much wealth you have to give zakat. We haven't done how much wealth you have to have before you can't take zakat. So there's also a threshold. If you're below that threshold and you don't have that much wealth, you can take zakat. But we're going to look at that separately, inshallah. There's a separate slide on that. So faqir is a poor person who has wealth, but they're below that threshold, so they can take zakat. And miskin is someone who has absolutely no wealth at all. Amilin are administrators of zakat. Now I've written here the administrators of zakat employed by an Islamic government to collect zakat, and I've mentioned this for a specific reason. So if you go back to the time of the Prophet ﷺ, or the time of the Khulafa, what would happen is you have a khalif, you have an amir, you have a leader, and the amir has a level of wilaya, authority over all the people under his authority, right? He has control over all of them and a certain level of authority. So he represents the rich and the poor. So when the Amir has his people to go and collect zakat and takes it from the rich people, the wealthy people, when he takes, because he's a representative of the poor as well, when he takes that amount, it's as though he's taken possession on behalf of the poor. And what would happen is those people that were sent out to collect and distribute the zakat, they will be paid a certain wage as administrators of zakat under this category of amilin. Now, many ulama consider this concept of amilin to apply only in a scenario where you have a government in place for various reasons. One is because of this concept of wilaya and authority over the people. That's what gives you the right to be able to even pay a wage to the zakat workers from that. And number 2, it prevents a lot of abuse from taking place. For example, just say I want to decide to start collecting zakat. So I tell people I'm going to collect zakat, I'm going to go and distribute it. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to deduct all my expenses, my flight, my travel, all of that from that, because I'm considering myself an amilin, right? So you can see a lot of abuse that can take place. So some ulama have said that this only is applicable where there is an Islamic government and that government has this authority over the people. That's where they can use the zakat that's been collected into the government to pay those zakat administrators and distribute the rest amongst the fuqara and the poor people. Some people there is research going on. Again, this is another area where people are doing research to try and apply that to certain charity organizations, etc. But that is something which personally I'm not too comfortable with at this moment in time. Many ulama have put this as a condition to prevent the abuse and this concept of wilaya authority, that you need to have a government in place that's going to be doing this. Next category is mu'allafatul qulub. This is a category at the time of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Certain people were given zakat for various reasons. So people that had embraced Islam, who were maybe not so strong in their faith at that time, they may have been given a certain amount to give them a bit more encouragement. They used to maybe be non-Muslims who were harmful to the Muslim community. So they would be given a zakat to save the Muslim community from their harm. Now, during the time of Umar radiallahu anhu, the basis of this ruling, this mu'allafatul qulub, is that the Muslim community at that time were relatively small in comparison to the rest of the world, right? So where that is the case, you could use the zakat fund for the purpose of mu'allafatul qulub, right? However, during the time of Umar, when Islam expanded and went beyond and became much more, had flourished and had become a much more powerful entity, if you want to put it that way, the consideration was that this initial reasoning and the illah behind the ruling, the reasoning of Islam being weak, etc., it was no longer applicable. So that, therefore, this category also is no longer applicable. 5 is a riqab. So a slave may have an agreement with the master that if I pay you a certain amount of money, then I will be free. So you can help the slave pay that amount off. Again, that's not going to be applicable today. Gharimin is a person who has debt. So a person may have like £1,000, but they have like £3,000 worth of debt that they need to pay off. Okay, so that person is poor. You can help them by giving them zakat. Fi sabilillah, in the cause of Allah. So these are poor soldiers in the Muslim armed forces who are being given a certain amount of money to help them join. Also, some ulama have under fi sabilillah included a person who's gone for Hajj and they don't have any wealth to continue with their Hajj. Munqati'. They don't have any money to continue with their Hajj, so you can support them with your zakat funds. That also overlaps with Ibn al-Sabil, because Ibn al-Sabil is a person like, if I, for example, I'm a traveler. I travel to America, for example, right? Now, I have a lot of wealth at home, alhamdulillah, but in America, something happens and I've lost all my wealth, or I've been robbed, or something like that, Allah protects, right? At that moment in time, I don't have any money as a traveler, though I have money at home. But I can take zakat funds at that time to help me get to my destination, etc. But these are the main 8 categories of zakat. So we're mainly focusing on the fuqara, the miskin, maybe the ibn al-sabil, and these categories of zakat. So poor people, right? Now, how do you determine if a person can take zakat or not? What determines a person to be poor or not to be poor? So this is really, really important to understand. You have 2 thresholds. You have a threshold for when you have to pay zakat. If you have a certain amount of wealth, you have to pay zakat. And there's a threshold that if you have a certain amount of wealth, you can't take zakat. So some people may not have to pay zakat, but at the same time, they can't take zakat because they have other assets which prevent them from doing so. So first, let's break down assets, right? A person has 2 types of assets. You're going to have zakatable assets, gold, silver, merchandise, trade goods, right? The cash should be in there as well, actually. Cash, gold, silver, and merchandise. That will determine whether you have to pay zakat or not. Okay, if you have the Niṣāb, you have to pay zakat. If not, you don't pay zakat. Whether you can take zakat or not depends on the other assets that you have as well, right? All other assets, non-zakatable assets are all grouped together. The zakatable assets, anything other than cash, gold, silver, merchandise is non-zakatable assets. Now, non-zakatable assets, if you have the Niṣāb amount, so let's say our Niṣāb is £270. If you have non-zakatable assets which reach £270, you cannot take zakat. Of course, if you've got debts that are more than that and it cancels out, then yes. But if you have excess wealth that is up to the value of £270, then you cannot take zakat. However, we're not going to take all your wealth into consideration, all other wealth. We're going to deduct essentials. And what essentials are, I'm going to discuss in the next slide. So for example, a person has, very random example, a person has a house worth £200,000, and then they've got £150 cash, and they've got £50 worth of other assets, right? Very unlikely, but just say that's the case. They've got how much? £200,000 worth house, and they've got £200 worth of cash. Their cash is below Niṣāb, so they don't pay zakat. Let's do this again. £200,000 worth of house. So they've got a house. Then they've got other assets, of which £50 is zakatable, 150 are other assets, right? Now, we're not going to say this person has over £300,000 worth of assets because his house is essential. So we're going to deduct that. We're going to see that, okay, the other assets are 150, the non-essentials are 150, and zakatable is 50, so that's only 200. That doesn't come up to the 270 Niṣāb, so this person can take zakat. Now, how do you determine what a person can deduct? That's what we have on this slide here. This is called necessary assets. So your necessary assets are clothes which you're using, which you have. So you don't. So all your clothes, just say they come up to about £100, right? £150, £200. You don't have to value them if you're using them. And you actually, for example, if you have a coat which you use only in winter, you're going to be using it in winter, so you can count that as a deductible. You don't need to put that into your zakat. If you have a house that you're living in and you're using to stay in, that is not going to be deducted either. That's going to be deducted. You don't count that in. assets that you have for work. So just say you're a plumber, you have a van with all your tools and equipment, and that comes up to like £3,000. We're not going to say you have £3,000 worth of assets because that's for your work and you need it. Personal car, place of residence, furnishing in the house, sofa, kitchen stuff, sinks, cooker, all this kind of stuff is essential. Now, this is an area which requires a lot of research because there are certain things which are kind of hybrid. Are they essential or not? So, for example, some ulama have considered things like a phone as an essential. People need phones nowadays to communicate, etc. It's considered kind of like a necessary asset. Your laptop, if it's for work and stuff, then you need it. Other than that, if it's considered essential or not, Allahu Alam. Some ulama are more relaxed in this, and they say if you're regularly using something like this and it's part of your day-to-day routine and you're using it for your buying and selling at home, etc., then you can consider as you can deduct that. But if it's just like I've got 2 laptops, I use one, the other one's just sitting around, I've got it for no reason, right? It's just there, and that's obviously beyond your essential needs. So you're going to deduct a person's essential needs, and then you're going to look at the remaining assets. Now have a look at this chart. This will, inshallah, address most issues here. There are 3 categories of people. You're either going to be someone who has to pay zakat, right? So the blue here represents a person's zakatable assets. And the green is a person's other assets minus the essentials. So we've already deducted the essentials, whatever non-essential that they have. Okay, so they've got a few other things together which are non-essential. If your zakatable assets are above the Niṣāb here, then obviously you have to pay zakat, and you can't take zakat clearly, because if you're paying zakat, then you're not going to be taking zakat. If you are someone whose zakatable assets are below the Niṣāb, but your non-zakatable are above, excluding your essentials, then you don't have to pay zakat because your zakatable are below, but your non-zakatable are above, so you also can't take zakat. So you don't pay, but you can't take. You will have to pay Zakatable though. Okay? So remember, Zakatable is to do with your non-essentials. Even if your non-essentials go above Niṣāb, you have to pay Zakatable, you have to give Qurbani, you have to perform all those other rules come into them. But not zakat, not paying zakat. If a person has zakatable and non-zakatable below the Niṣāb, right, factoring their debts and everything, then that person is a valid recipient of zakat. We're running out of time, so I'm going to quickly flick through the rest of the slides to explain certain points, and then we'll deal with whatever questions are left, so that most of the principles are covered within our 2-hour time limit, inshallah ta'ala. When you're giving your zakat to a person, a poor person, they have to gain ownership. If you give someone zakat to borrow, your zakat is undone. They have to become the owner of that zakatable wealth. So now I've got all of these places. Can I give zakat? What do you guys think? Tell me in the comments. What do you guys think? I can give zakat to a masjid, madrasa, orphanage, bigger well, hospital. What are your thoughts? No. Why not? But don't masjids collect zakat? Hospitals collect zakat. Some hospitals. An orphanage collects zakat. But what's happening here? Is our zakat done? One person does not receive anything, does not receive the ownership. No, owner is not clear. It has to go into the ownership. Yeah, it has to go. Because there's no sole owner of zakat, right? So what happens is, if you're giving it to this institution, your zakat's not done. If, for example, the masjid is paying its bills with zakat money, right? There's no money going to a poor person. There's no owner of the masjid. The masjid is a waqf entity, right? So no money is going to the ownership of any poor person, so zakat's not done. But if that institution is an agent who is representing who's representing poor people, and they're going to pass it on to poor people, no, it can't be given to non-Muslims. If the ownership is, if it's going to poor people, then the zakat would be done. So for example, there are certain hospitals in other countries, what they do is they take zakat funds, and with that zakat fund, what they do is, if a poor person comes in who is eligible for zakat and they can't pay for their medication, they provide them the medication through the zakat fund, because that medication is being purchased with zakat fund. And remember, you don't have to give zakat in cash. So the medication being given to the poor person, so that zakat is actually going to the poor person. So that would be valid. Similarly, if zakat is being given to dig a communal well where multiple people will use, then that zakat won't be done. But if you know a poor person who's eligible for zakat and you dig them a well and that well belongs to them, that will be valid. And be very, very careful in this area, right? there are this institution in the middle who you're giving your zakat to and who are passing that zakat on. You need to be very, very careful who they are. Okay. Now, we're not going to go into names and organizations or charities or people or individuals, but you need to ensure that whoever you're giving your zakat to is going to pass that zakat on to a poor person. Otherwise, your zakat may not be accepted. Now, remember, the middle agent is a representative of either you or the representative of the poor person. So just say, I know 10 poor people that I have in my mind in a certain country that are eligible for zakat. And as their representative, I come and collect money and I say, give me your zakat money so I can give it to them. I'm a representative of the poor people. Because of that, when you give me your money, it's as though you're absolved of your duty because you pass it on to a representative of the poor people. However, a lot of the time, the middleman is not a representative of the poor people, it's actually representative of the zakat payer. Now, who is basically just looking for people to give zakat to. So just say I don't have any fixed poor people in my mind, and I'm collecting zakat from different people, and I'm going to go and find eligible people to give zakat to. So basically what you've done is you've given zakat to someone who's your representative. So that's not actually gone to the poor person. Now, if that person disappears off the face of this world, your zakat's not done. Yes, that person may be liable to pay you that amount if they didn't take care of it and they stole the money or whatever. However, your zakat is not done. So you need to make sure that we're very careful with vetting who we are giving our zakat to and who is carrying our zakat and passing on to the poor people. And alhamdulillah, we have a lot of mediums where reliable, trusted sources that have very strict, rigid zakat policies in place and guarantee that your zakat goes to certain poor people into their ownership. That is very important for us to look into this and take that into consideration. Quickly, who you can't give zakat to. You can't give zakat to your parents, grandparents, mother, father, grandmother. You can't give it to your son, your daughter, grandson, granddaughter. You can't give it to your husband and your wife. But from your relatives, parents, children, husband and wife, other than that, you can give. You can give to your siblings, you can give to your nephews and nieces, uncles and aunts, grandparents, siblings, all of those diagonally, you can give. You can't give up and down and to your husband and wife. You also can't give to a Sayyid, a person who's a descendant of Ali radiallahu anhu, Abbas, Ja'far, Aqil, Harith bin Abdul Muttalib. Anyone that comes from that lineage will not be a valid recipient of zakat. And obviously a person who has wealth above the Niṣāb. Okay, I think I am done going 1 minute over. Apologies for going over by 1 minute. From my side, there's just a few quick fire points I'm going to mention here that just cover random points. So zakat should be distributed within 1 year. Try and distribute it within 1 year at the latest. If you paid zakat on gold and jewelry, and the next day you have that gold and jewelry, you still need to pay zakat on that gold and jewelry. Okay. If you have rental income coming in from a property that you have, you don't pay zakat on that property if you didn't buy it to sell, but you pay zakat on the rent once it's come in, right? It's a weak debt. If you're putting money aside for savings for Hajj or for university or whatever, then you still have to pay zakat on that, because whatever you've kept it for your children's wedding, if you have your wealth and you've stored it, you have to pay zakat on that as well. You can pay zakat in advance if you want to. Like if my date is next month and I want to pay zakat now because Ramadan, that I can give zakat now. However, next month on my zakat date, I have to calculate my exact amount. And if I gave less, then I have to add more and give more in zakat. If I gave more, then I can factor that into the following year. There was something else that just came in my mind here, which was really important. Give zakat less, give zakat more. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad. There was something that I just had. If you're going to pay in advance, then you have to factor that in. If you've paid more, okay, inshallah, if it comes back, I'll let you know. You don't pay zakat on haram wealth, interest, etc. There's no zakat on anything other than cash, gold, silver, and merchandise. If you have diamonds and stuff, you don't have to pay zakat unless it was purchased for the purpose of selling on. Oh, intention. Yes, that's what it was. Intention is very important. When you're paying zakat, you need to have an intention that this money is going as zakat wealth. Okay. Or the second option is when you separate the wealth and put it separate, you have an intention then. So some people, they're not able to pay zakat the way they used to because of the lockdown. So what they're doing is they're taking their zakat amount out and they're putting it into a certain envelope. And when you've done that, that's your intention done. So then when you give the poor person from there, your zakat is being fulfilled. So that's fine. But if you're giving it directly, then you have to have an intention that you're giving zakat. Sometimes a wife might have only jewelry, gold, and she has no other cash, right? So how does she pay her zakat? Well, number one, she can either sell the jewelry and pay zakat. Either way, she has to pay a zakat if it's reached a niṣāb. So sell the jewelry and pay zakat. If you don't want to sell the jewelry, then you can either borrow money and pay the zakat and then pay the money back, or you can request someone, your husband or whatever, you can request if they want to, then they can pay zakat on your behalf. You let them know, and then they pay on your behalf. Okay, I think that is me covered from my side, inshallah ta'ala. اللهم انت السلام ومنك السلام تبارك يا ذا الجلال والإكرام. ربنا آتنا في الدنيا حسنة وفي الآخرة حسنة وقنا عذاب النار. اللهم إنا نسألك الهدى والتقى والعفاف والغنى. اللهم إنا نسألك من خير ما سألك به نبيك وحبيبك محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم، ونعوذ بك من شر ما استعاذك منه نبيك وحبيبك محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم، وأنت المستعان وعليك البلاغ ولا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله. اللهم انفعنا بما علمتنا وعلمنا ما ينفعنا وزدنا علما. ربنا تقبل منا إنك أنت السميع العليم، وتب علينا يا مولانا إنك أنت التواب الرحيم. سبحان ربك رب العزة عما يصفون، وسلام على المرسلين، والحمد لله رب العالمين برحمتك.